On today's episode, a Sabres recap, a Preds game recap, and Cayden Primeau is shining finally.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 970. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, well, I'm not joined today, by the wonderful Scott Metla. Scott had a personal thing to attend to, so he has not watched the Predators game. He did watch the Sabres game. We are going to do a 3 up and 3 down, but that is going on the Tuesday episode. Usually we do that on Mondays. If you're a new listener, we do a 3 up and 3 down every Monday, but the last couple of weeks, because of back-to-backs or news happening, we have pushed the 3 up, 3 down to Tuesday, so you will get that. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I do want to touch on today. Also, very, very quickly, as you know, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. So please subscribe, tell your friends, send us emails at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, and you'll find us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. Either way, keep in touch with us. As you know, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And we will be every day through December, throughout the entire season. We actually don't even have an off season. We go down to 3 episodes a day, but we are always, always here for you. And throughout the holidays, I believe we're only missing Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day, if I'm not mistaken. But we're here every other day. And it does help to have so many episodes because there was a back-to-back. And I have to tell you, I'm not a big fan of the weekend back-to-backs because we have one episode on Monday. We do get weekends off. So we have to kind of cram all of the recap goodness into one episode. And you're all going to have to bear with me. I usually do these with Scott. I'm going to try my best to recap the games as I saw them. And obviously, I'm going to start with the Buffalo Sabres game. That was first. And I thought, honestly, I know that Cayden Primeau was the story of the game, and we are going to get into that a little bit later in the show. But I thought the Canadiens didn't do badly overall in that game against Buffalo. There were a lot of defensive mishaps, quite a bit, and obviously they got saved by goaltending. But I saw a lot that I liked in the team against the Sabres, and obviously the shootout was fun. To me, the Sabres game was a fun game, right? And you can talk a lot about how, an overtime or shootout win isn't exactly the same as a dominant regulation win. And you'd be absolutely right. But at this stage in the Canadiens rebuild, sometimes you just need a fun game. I have to say, Devin Levi, the real deal. I really, I understand why Canadiens fans covet him, and I understand why Buffalo is not going to give us Devin Levi. Big fan of his. Did want to mention that, obviously, Jeff Skinner is inevitable. He's like Thanos. So that's always going to happen. I thought Kyle Okposo obviously was all over the place, really, really taking control over the game. And if not for Primeau, there would have been a lot more Sabres goals in that game, I felt. Also, Owen Power, wow. And I'm not going to make a dad joke there. I'll make it when Scott is back, and then you can all boo me together, or maybe I'll make it on a live episode. But either way, Owen Power, extremely, extremely exciting. The Sabres are a fun team, and I know they're in the division, they're a division rival. But this is the kind of Habs Sabres game that I have been waiting for a decade, because for a decade, all we've gotten is a boring game that the Canadiens lose. This was an exciting game, the Canadiens won. And I do feel that has to be pointed out. Like, the Sabres are a really exciting team to watch. Yes, I understand how low they are in the standings. Yes, I understand they're in their like $1.3 million build at this point. Yes, I understand, everything you don't want to necessarily be in the same position as the Sabres, but wow, like what a fun, exciting team to watch. And I really thought the Canadians held their own, but obviously I've strongly felt that like it's not just about the injuries. Like the defense currently doesn't really know sort of which direction to lean in. I would say like they don't specifically have an identity per se. So there were some lapses, obviously. There were some moments where, there were more than I would say three or four odd man rushes in favor of the Sabres. And again, we're going to talk about Cayden Primeau in a bit, but if it wasn't for him, the score would have been way more lopsided. And that overtime, I really thought that he sort of had the moment of the game with the save that he had. And then finally, the shootout. I know people hate the shootout, but that was such a fun shootout for a Habs fan that you saw all the Habs you want to see scoring, Cole Caulfield. And I have to go back. Sorry, I'm like jumping back and forth here, but Nick Suzuki's goal in regulation, Jayden Struble, phenomenal, right? And there was like a little story about how he and Devin Levi had talked because they used to be teammates, and they're talking about, you got to let me score one. No, I'm not going to let you score one. Well, Jayden Struble ended up at the, Jayden Struble ended up winning that one, I should say. I'm trying to talk too fast, and I think I should just calm down. I'm talking at the pace of that game, but there were a lot of like other exciting things about that game, and I thought, to be honest, I didn't want to go back and look at the underlying numbers after that one. I thought it was exciting. It was fun. It was absolutely, and I don't know if it's biased. You can tell me if it's biased just because every other Sabres game that I've watched in the last, like, I don't know how long, since maybe 2008, not even the last decade, the last decade and a half have just been boring. The Habs Sabres game have just been boring, and more often than not, it's been really frustrating for Canadiens fans. So I don't know if that's a bias there. But again, like it was just, I thought the game was good. I thought the Canadiens got a lot of things together. Obviously, Tanner Pearson is now out. We will talk a little bit about that a little in a second, because there's a couple of other injury notes that I wanted to touch on. And truly, I think that the shootout, like, you can talk about Cole Caulfield maybe like gaining a bit of confidence from that one. And we can talk about Slavkovsky, because I think that in recent weeks, Slavkovsky has quietly become more and more of a force on the ice. And he's kind of learning to control himself a little bit more. I feel like he has a lot of skill and a lot of talent, but he has not been able to channel it and control it in the way that we want. And that has kind of, the question marks on his development or not, that has led more often than not to him either looking not good on the ice. He just doesn't look like the player that we thought the Canadiens drafted at first overall. Looks like he needs a lot of work. Looks kind of like he looks like an amateur on the ice sometimes. And I think that the fact that he's slowly being able to harness it and control it and focus it really has yielded really positive results. It does help that Martin St. Louis did put him on the top line finally after us asking for it for so long. That kind of really allowed him to use space a little bit better with that line mate combination. We remember that he did have a lot of chemistry with Kirby Dach, so it's just kind of a little bit lost for a while. And when I say a while, I mean a season and a bit. But I truly do feel that he has come a long way, and a lot of that has to do with just calming down. I mean, it's not he's not an excitable player as much, but I think just being able to just really take control of his own skill and not allow it to get out of hand. So I did want to praise him, and obviously he was rewarded with getting that shootout goal, having that moment with his teammates, and even the way that he celebrated was a little like it was more. It represented a quiet, not an arrogance, but a quiet confidence, I think. In the meantime, Wow, I rambled on so long that I finished the first segment. I haven't even touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. So we will talk about that a little bit later. But I also have to do the Preds recap. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadians. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And let's talk about passion, drive, and patience for a second. Uri Slavkovsky, what I just said, doesn't that really, really tie into that? eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, now it's time to talk about that Preds game. Little less of a fun result there, and I think the issue is, like, while I was watching the game, and I hate doing this, I sometimes just end up watching the game on social media and allowing the comments to inform my view of the game. And there were moments where the Canadians didn't look pretty. And I think I got a little bit lost in that. I got very, very lost in that, in fact. Big note on the game was obviously that David Savard was back. So essentially, the Canadians loaned Matthias Norlinder to Laval, and Gustav Lindstrom was removed from the lineup. I'm making this motion. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see me like making a removing motion with my hand. Was removed from the lineup in favor of David Savard. I didn't think anything really. He was paired with Matheson for most of the game, I think. I didn't really register the defense that much in that Preds game. I think the Canadians didn't look like it, but when you went back and looked at their underlying numbers, they controlled the game a lot. There were a lot of shots generated, and a lot of those shots were promising ones. Like, I think that's the way that I would read this game. But at the end of the day, they did fall apart in moments, and Martin St. Louis said that as well. Like, and then they couldn't get the momentum back. The power play really hurt them. They did lose momentum, and that's a real thing, by the way. People always say like, "Oh, you know what? It's psychological. It's not a real thing. It's an intangible." It is a real thing. When they have an abysmal power play, it takes longer to get back into the game every single time. And the Canadians have a really not great power play, judging by that game. So I wanted to give them a lot of the benefit of the doubt because it is the second game of back-to-back. So at moments they did look tired and flat. They really did. But I think that they really were able to sort of balance it out in terms of the underlying numbers. So I'm not too disappointed with that Preds game. I'm not too disappointed with that result. But a big note, which I touched on in the previous segment, is that Tanner Pearson was obviously not in the game because he's now going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks, and that's not ideal. And I'm honestly at a loss for what to say in terms of injuries at this point with the Canadians. Like, their luck is just simply so terrible. But like in the Sabres game, I did want to point out a couple of people on the opposing team that played so well that the Canadians had a lot of fits with them. One of them was obviously UC Saros playing amazing, and the Canadians couldn't solve him. So that offensive potential was there, but they weren't able to kind of crack that. But at the same time, I don't know, like whenever it's a back to back, I just feel like it's a wash. I truly feel like it's a wash. If they win, it feels like a surprise, right? I did really quickly want to point out that Jake Allen played pretty well. He is now, I think he's the goalie, the odd goalie out at this point. We will talk about it in our final segment. But other than that, I don't know that I could be disappointed with the Canadiens game because they first of all they did dominate possession at a long stretches of the game. They just didn't win it. Like they looked tired, they looked flat. But if you look at the numbers, like it's a shame they didn't win. But at the same time, as if you're a Habs fan wanting a higher draft pick, it's not really the end of the world. You want to see them play well. You want to see them play a bit cohesively. And I thought the defense was better than it was in the previous game. Um, it wasn't abjectly awful. It wasn't amazing, but I felt like Cayden Primeau had to do a lot more work against Buffalo than Jake Allen had to do against the Preds. But he still came out like having improved. His I think in the game he had a 938 save percentage, which is phenomenal. And I just feel like if the Canadians weren't tired, if they weren't at the end of the back-to-back, that game would have been a lot more exciting and the score would have reflected their effort. Like I did think there was an effort. It was just labored, if that makes sense. But I don't want to dwell too much on that game because the exciting topic at hand right now is the goalie carousel that the Canadians find themselves with. And I did want to focus the rest of the episode on that. And I do want to get into goalie talk. I really do. But first, I have to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. In the meantime, like I said, coming up, we are going to talk about Cayden Primeau, and we've got some goalie questions to answer, and that's all coming up in one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. We thought that Cole Caulfield could score 50 goals. That's not happening. But you know what? The Avalanche could be hoisting the Stanley Cup again. It could be anybody, really. Maybe it is finally Toronto's year. And you? You can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And the app is so easy to use, and fans can also play daily fantasy NFL, which is big right now, NBA, MLB, and college football all on Sleeper. And really, you can you can connect with other Canadiens fans, you can connect with other sports fans, and your entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether players like an Ovechkin, a Crosby, a McKinnon, or let's even go towards Bedard, will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Habs fans. You can win 100 times your money playing You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. I think it's finally time to talk about the Canadiens goalie carousel. So let's get into it. Cayden Primeau has not played a whole lot this season. And I have to absolutely admit, when I saw him play for the first time this season in the regular season, I think it was even the preseason, I thought, here we go again. Cayden Primeau can play so well in the AHL, and he's not going to be able to translate it to the NHL level yet again. But now I'm singing a different tune. We've seen him play solidly in a few games. I want to say he's only um, like he hasn't played abjectly terrible, is what I want to say. And against the Buffalo Sabres, he was the story. He was the story of the game because he was frustrating the Sabres. He made 46 saves, and a lot of those chances that the Sabres had were really, really tough. And he obviously he stood big in the shootout and ending up winning that. But I feel like I'm seeing a new side to Cayden Primeau that I didn't think there was anymore. I'm seeing the same promise that I saw in him before he had that stretch of really abysmal games. I know we talk about the defense a lot. I know he doesn't get helped by the team in front of him. The team in front of him isn't great. I mean that's just kind of the way it is, right? It's a tough situation for any developing goaltender, and remember, he's still under 25. It's a tough situation for anyone like that to be in. And especially since, I don't know if it was your initials or your history in the NCAA and all these other lower leagues, but you show up in Montreal and everybody's asking you to be the next one, right? To be the next Carey Price, to be the next amazing goaltender. And I think that's a lot of pressure on somebody, but also he wasn't fully, he didn't get a chance to really grow in Montreal because I feel like the COVID years messed a lot of things up. And then obviously there's Carey Price when Carey Price was able to play. That's not going anywhere until, he can't play anymore, which is exactly what happened. If you're a developing goaltender, you can't play backup because you want to get as many starts as possible and you want to improve your game as much as possible. And everything he did at the NHL level just ended up backfiring. He just had not great showings. He did not look confident, and the team would lose confidence, and he would end up with abysmal stats. And it felt like he was a career AHL goaltender. But I have to say, this season, I've seen a change in him, and I think the change is in his demeanor because I feel like the talent is there and the talent always was there. I think the big difference between playing in the AHL and the NHL is because of the increase in quality of the opponents you're facing and their ability to score on you, you need to be able to keep your calm a lot more. And I feel like there's been a lot of growth on that front. I have to say, like, I'm not as well versed in puck tracking as some people are. Like often I'll notice if it's not great, but with Cayden Primeau, maybe it's because he hasn't had a whole lot of starts, or maybe it's because I'm trying to compare him to someone, or maybe it's something that I'm just not noticing in these games lately. I can't tell you if that's gotten better or not, but his responses seem to be a lot better anticipating. Like he seems to be a lot better at anticipating. That does come with experience, as one of our listeners likes to say. Paul Brancho likes to say, like he needs that experience to be able to anticipate these things. But I honestly like I don't even know. I don't think he got more talented. I don't think he even like really shifted his attitude. I think he always wanted to do well in the NHL. Sorry, I think he always wanted to translate that AHL game to the NHL. I think he probably just didn't know how, and it's too soon to tell, obviously, but I'm feeling a bit more comfortable having him on the team, and I think maybe like Jake Allen might be the one to go. He might be the one to get traded, and I think at this point, to be honest, like it's really going to come down to what Kent Hughes gets offered for Jake Allen versus Cayden Primeau. Like if you're going to be trading Cayden Primeau, you want something for the future in return, whereas if you're trading Jake Allen, it's not necessarily like you always want to pick or a prospect or whatever, but with Cayden Primeau, you have to be able to answer that question: who's going to be next, right? After Samuel Montembeault, or who's going to be growing while Samuel Montembeault is essentially the starter of this team. So I think like Kent Hughes has his work cut out for him, but I feel like Cayden Primeau has earned himself a longer leash lately. And again, it's only been I think 6 games, so it's too soon to like really call it. But I kept watching the highlights of the Sabres game, and he made the save after save after save. Like Kyle Post was seeing him in his nightmares, right? So I feel like this question is, for me, the Cayden Primeau question is on its way to being answered, which means the which of the three goalies, which two of the three goalies do the Habs keep, is becoming an even more confusing question. And that is a question that we will try to answer over the course of the next few weeks or months or however long it takes for Kent Hughes to make that decision and trying to get assets for any one of these guys. I do think it's going to be Jake Allen going. It's probably going to go to a playoff team that needs a backup goaltender and a veteran presence. That's how I see it. Those are the kinds of teams that'll give up picks more than prospects or more than players. So we'll see what Kent Hughes has up his sleeve. But I, for one, am excited to see Cayden Primeau take next steps. Now, it could be his next start is an absolute disaster, and we go back to having the same conversation: is he a career AHL goalie or not? But at this point, he's young enough that I'm willing to give it a few more games. I'm willing to wait a little bit more, and I'm excited to see what comes out of him in the next little while. And at the end of the season, maybe we're having a totally different conversation. I know one of these goalies won't be there, but maybe Cayden Primeau's there, and then we start having the conversations. Can he steal the starting spot from Samuel Montembeault next year? I don't know. That'd be fun to see. And as always, we will be here for that discourse because we are Locked On Canadiens. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can email us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can also leave mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. Just put mailbag question at the beginning or MBQ for those of you who have started doing that, just so that we know that you want us to bring it up on the show. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, and we will talk to you tomorrow with that 3 Up, 3 Down.